This is my microphone check. Y'all hear me? Excellent. We're going to get started here. If everyone could come in and find your seats. If you're signing in, we're excited that you're here. Thank you for coming. My name is Andrea Pickett. I'm the Director of Outreach and Engagement for the Portsmouth Housing Authority, and I'm just here to welcome you tonight and thank you for coming. I see familiar faces in the room, a lot of people who participated in our first two sessions, and we received a lot of great feedback during those. We had great conversations. They were members of our community who were living in Panaway Manor, members of our community from the broader Portsmouth, people who've committed to this project through volunteerism on the Blue Ribbon Housing Committee, the City Council, our city staff. It was an excellent turnout and engagement, and we have had a chance to process a lot of what we've talked about, and tonight we're excited to share that with you. So thank you again for coming. Lori Waltz is here. She is a facilitator, a neutral facilitator that we've hired. She's famous, everybody. Go ahead and clap. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You guys are funny. My name's Lori Waltz. I am the Executive Director of Leadership Seacoast, which those fine folks that were clapping and cheering are alumni of the program, and that explains that. I'm here this evening not with that hat on, but I'm also a trained facilitator, so my role here is in that capacity. To echo Andrea's comments, it is nice to see familiar faces from the last week, the couple meetings that we had. For those of you that are unfamiliar with how this process went, I just want to assure you that everything that was presented on Thursday was presented again on Saturday. There were no shifts from the script. Obviously, questions were different because it was a different group of people, but all the information that was shared out was identical. I would like to also just reframe what the goals of these sessions are, and that is to gather feedback from the community, which we've done. It is to strengthen the relationship between the Portsmouth Housing Authority and the community, which I think is in process and continuing to be done. And it is also to create the best design to serve the needs of incoming residents and the existing community. So between those two sessions, that Thursday and Saturday was a little lower because we had some snow, so we had the diehard New Englanders that came out that Saturday morning. But there were about 40 people that participated in those two sessions. So you're going to hear a little bit later about the results of those sessions. I also want to let you know that the expectations for today's session is to recap what the community engagement has looked like so far, to share the design with the amenities, to discuss questions and comments that have been received so far, and to recap the highlights. We obviously, again, we are on a 2-hour time frame. We do have a section specifically for Q&A. So if you have questions before that Q&A session comes up, if you would kindly jot them down and hold on to them until we get to that point this evening, that would be really helpful so that we can move the agenda along. And Andrea, I think you're going to come back up now.
I am.
Thanks, everybody.
Sorry.
You're welcome.
Hi again. Here we are, community engagement. So we talked about this at both of the first two sessions. Excuse me if you've listened to this before, but it's just really important to talk about the kind of community engagement that we've been doing, the fact that we've been doing it for the past 2 years, and how important it is to hear from our community about their thoughts on this process of bringing housing to the site of the Sherburne School. For over a decade, but for this purpose, we're going to start in 2016 with the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Housing Committee. The City of Portsmouth, not just the Portsmouth Housing Authority, has been committed to talking about how we can solve the problem of affordable housing for our community. As a result of beginning this conversation, we embarked on our first Portsmouth Listens Housing Study Circles in 2017. It was very similar to the one that we did recently in that it was from people from all walks of life in Portsmouth, age groups, demographics came together and really dove into the causes and effects of the affordable housing crisis. Following that, the mayor at the time put together the city land use committee to talk about the zoning and the planning and what goes into finding places for affordable housing and what's blocking affordable housing, and what we can do to amend any code that might be causing us to not build it at the amount or the frequency that we'd like to be. In 2022, the Portsmouth Housing Authority commissioned a survey and a housing market study. Our survey reached over 600 participants, and our housing market study was used as a point of reference for coming conversations, including the Portsmouth Listens that happened this past year, and many of the conversations and RFPs that we had for this housing process that we're going through now. The City Council identified priorities. The Sherburne Neighborhood Meeting happened in 2023, and the PHA Sherburne report to the City Council followed that in about 6 months later. Again, we restarted the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Housing Committee, and as a result, issued the Sherburne RFQ and RFP. The Housing Committee then, after going through those processes, made their recommendation. We had a chance to answer additional questions, and finally the City Council selected the PHA in December of 2024, which brings us to the community meetings that we're having here. All of these meetings and engagements have been a chance for the PHA to hear from the community and engage and then take the information that we're getting and put it together into the project that we're getting ready to present to you tonight and throughout the past 2 meetings. So with that, Rob, would you like to come up and share your site design? Oh, am I off agenda?
Yeah.
Sorry. Next page. Rob, would you like to come share the recap?
No, so my name's Craig Welch. I'm the director of the Portsmouth Housing Authority, as you guys know. I wanted to, Andrew made some introductions about who was here. I would like to just take a second and make some specific introductions because I often, I believe that we are our own best resources, especially in a small city like this. And so so you might know some people in the room that you could ask some questions to that that might not be me or others. So first, there's city staff here: Monty Bohannon, Susan Morrill, the city attorney, as well as Jennifer Smith from the city attorney's office, and the boss, Karen Kennard, is here as well. So we're working on this project, obviously, in partnership. Also, we're lucky to have a couple city councilors here. Thank you for coming. Councilor Cook and Councilor Bagley are out back. Oh, Councilor Blaylock is right there as well. Thank you so much for coming and being interested in the project and coming to the other ones of these as well. From the Workforce Housing Coalition, there's Taylor Cray is here. She's the one that's taking some notes. And so they're a regional advocacy organization. And so Taylor knows a ton of stuff about workforce housing and how it works and policy and all that kind of stuff. Ben Van Camp is here. He's the director of the Portsmouth, the Chamber Collaborative, the Greater Seacoast, so has a lot of employers that are really interested in this, and Ben, the Chamber has made this a top issue. Also, Ryan Pope is here. Now, Ryan is the new, the gentleman right there next to Taylor. Ryan has just recently been hired as the director of the multifamily department at the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. And so what the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority is the conduit for all of the tax credits that we get, or all the federal tax credits that we get, and other financing. So, and Ryan has a banking background, and so if you had questions about like income limits and rents and how these things are financed, you've got some real expertise there, and we're delighted to have Ryan in that job. That's one of the biggest things New Hampshire Housing does. So Andrew's on our staff. Obviously, Mark Lentz here is our facilities director and would serve as a construction manager and the owner's rep on our behalf. And then I have two of my, and then also Steve and Maureen are here. So Steve and Maureen are the direct abutters, the only direct abutters other than the industrial and office uses here. So they have a lot at stake here, obviously. I mean, a lot of people do, but they're the ones that are right next door. And I have bosses as well, even though I'm the director. And so Dan Main is a commissioner of the Portsmouth Housing Authority right here, and Ernie Carrier is on the PHA Housing Development Limited board, and we're delighted to have them. I have a terrific board, and these guys are an example to that. One thing that I was tasked to recap here is what we've heard so far, and this is probably from our notes. It might not be all inclusive to what everybody has said, but these were kind of the main pieces. And we have Rob here and Corey. Rob's from Market Square Architects, and Corey's from TF Moran, our engineers. So I'm not going to elaborate on stuff because they're going to talk about site design and some of the technical aspects of the site. So, but I'll just mention that that's what we heard. One obviously is the preservation of the school, and we've heard different viewpoints about that. And that's connected to the conversation about density, about how many units. Some people said get rid of the school, some people said keep the school, and the plan that we've had is in between that, is actually having a partial preservation of the school and partial demolition of the school. Visual impact came up a lot, how tall the buildings are, what the roof lines were like, whether they were pitched roofs or flat roofs, and what kind of style. The site plan, people had a lot of questions. Probably traffic might have been the biggest thing that came up overall, in my view. So, like traffic about the number of cars, the left-hand turn, all kinds of stuff that Corey can explain. And along with that, on the site plan was parking. The number of buildings, people had asked about bike storage and other bike pedestrian uses in public transportation has come up. Highway noise has come up, and our engineers will talk about that, about how we're mitigating noise. Energy efficiency, there were people that spoke about how important that is to all of us, but for building new buildings like this, that we should pursue very high standards and what that means, and also renewable energy as a part of that, and what kind of certification things are, like LEED or Passive House, and what those things mean. Accessibility was a big deal for people to have units in this building be accessible to seniors or other people with mobility issues. Green space was a big deal for a lot of people, both as an amenity and just otherwise, just because of the design of the project. We did have people talk about art and artist space, either as like shared studio space or live work space. People asked about public art as well. And some of those were spurred by the abutting use, because Steve and Maureen have a beautiful, they're artists and have a beautiful pottery studio right next door. And we thought an extension of that use would be interesting. People asked about indoor community space that Rob can talk about, the mix of units, whether this would be housing for the elderly or families or unrelated parties, and what the mix was between 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. People had asked about the qualifications for applicants, like who gets to, what the occupancy rules are, who gets to apply, who gets in, what those income limits are, and any preferences about local people. Somebody get asked about criminal background checks, and the nature of applying for and getting in. Project cost, folks had asked about. Steve Marine had. We had a lengthy discussion about buffer and the farm, the history of the farm, which was really interesting. and space for young artists. People asked about the time frame, which we're happy to talk about if that's still of interest. And a lot of people said why this is important, kind of affirming what this is, and of course other opportunities to participate in this process. And one person asked, "Are we keeping the name Sherburne School?" Which is a great question. I would say that's not up to us. That's going to, but I think that's a great idea. So having said all that summary, it might not be, forgive me if that's not inclusive of everything, but that was kind of the summary from the couple events that we've had, and I'll hand it off to Rob to talk about the site design and the architecture.
Thank you, Craig, for making sure we didn't pass over that. Thanks, Rob.
I'm going to come up here because I want the clicker. So a lot of what we talked about over the weekend, and the way we framed the conversation is there's a whole community of people that we're trying to satisfy. And with that, there's a lot of competing goals for the property, and all of them sort of interplay with each other. If you achieve one thing, you may not achieve the other. And so some of those things that we talked about a lot were the number of units. What's the right amount for the property? And we heard all extremes. Tear everything down and fit as many as you possibly can, and leave it the way that it is. And so what's that middle ground? We talked a lot about project cost and the factors that impact project cost, and one of the primary drivers for this project being affordability. And so that influences some of the other decisions you make on a property. We talked a lot about aesthetics. What do we think it should look like? What kind of language? Is it different for the different buildings? And we'll talk about some of the trends in terms of the information we heard back from people. And then what's the scale, especially as you get towards the street? How do all those things balance with how much green or open space we have on the property? People definitely wanted more of that and less of parking. Parking was the other part. Is it going to function? Is there enough parking to support the units? What will that mean for the neighborhood? How does that impact traffic? All of those other interrelated factors. And of course, the more that you park, the less green space, and you need to park the number of units that you've got. Noise was a topic that was discussed, and how we're mitigating that. What should happen to the school? Should it stay? Should it go? Should it go in entirety? So that was something that was discussed at length. Accessibility that Craig mentioned, and then also what amenities should be on the property. So just as a reminder to everyone, and this might be plus or minus a couple units, especially when it comes to what we can lay out in the school, which we don't know yet. But right now, there's 127 units is what is proposed, and that's including 8 units in the school. So in the back building that was on the site plan, there were 90 units. In the front building, there was 29, and then those were broken down into 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. So in terms of some of the trends that we heard back from the community, one of the biggest ones that we talked about was visual impact, and what size building and what height building and what should each of these buildings look like. And so the back building, which you can barely see in this image, that's a perspective from the street, is back there. And in general, the conversation for the back building, I think what we heard back in feedback is that for the most part, people were less concerned about if the back building had a modern feel or not. And if that modern aesthetic, which might be a flat roof or a little bit rectangular, enabled us to have better performance for sustainability and pursue a passive house. In the rear building, where it's less visible, that seemed to be generally acceptable. The feelings about this front building, and the front building we intentionally showed as 3 stories with a gable roof on top because we wanted to show it as high as it could, tall as it would be likely to be. And I think what we generally heard from people is, 1, this building is more visible from the street, and it's a traditional New England neighborhood, and people would like this building to feel traditional to New England also and have some of those traditional forms, traditional roof forms, whether it's hip or gable, but things that we're used to in New England. The other feedback that we got is that height was more important on this building. The back building, you step down in grade by a story, and so it's a story lower from where you see it on the street. But I think for the most part, the conversation of the front building is there was a preference to have this top story feel like it was under roof, even if that meant sacrificing some things in terms of a slightly higher project cost or maybe less sustainability. And that's exactly a good example of some of these trade-offs. In the back building, something that's a little bit more affordable from a construction cost standpoint or had more sustainability, people felt okay with making the trade-offs for aesthetics on that building. But for this building, it was more important to have that scale to the streetscape. And then finally, in general, I think what we've heard from the community as a large throughout this process is keeping this elevation of the existing building on the streetscape and having that green space in front was really of primary importance, especially to the residents of that neighborhood. So I think that was another trend that we heard in terms of feedback at those two conversations. And then energy efficiency was another one. So I think we've talked about that a little bit. I think in general, people want us to do as much of that as we can. And I think at the same time, some of those trade-offs we talked about in terms of the aesthetics, as you get closer to the street, some of those can drive the bus a little bit more. I think in general, people like the fact that there was a mix of units. They liked the fact that we're planning to have the entire site have accessibility to it and follow the accessible guidelines for each of the two buildings. The school itself may be a little bit harder to provide units for. We really need to get into the design of that one, but we should be able to provide accessibility into that building from grade as well, from the site as well. So I think those are some of the trends that we heard, at least relative to the architecture and site. I think in general, the other item that I wanted to touch on is, and we showed a couple different versions of this. Most of these are affordable projects of, I would say, varying degrees of design success, but it was really more about illustrating traditional New England materials and the types of things we tend to see on affordable projects, and then some modern language. And again, the feedback that we got as a trend, I think, was a modernish building might be okay in the back, but as we approach the street, we want to see something with more traditional forms and definitely things that we're used to seeing regionally or in this neighborhood, clapboard siding, masonry, base, those kinds of things were valued. And then this is just a reminder kind of the site. So that's the larger flat roof building in the back that we're talking about. This is the shorter building as we approach the street, and then the front portion of the school as it remains on the street. One of the other comments that I think Craig mentioned just a minute ago is there was a lot of conversation about community space. There will be some community space. It may not be in the interior of the buildings. It may not be open 24/7 to the public. It may be kind of a sign-up space. There's some rules about that, and of course, PHA has to figure out how to manage it, but there will be some community space. And then the question about live-work units is kind of an open one. I think it's something that we would like to accomplish if we can. I think a lot of it depends on when you're trying to turn a school into housing, it's not really designed to have the spaces that support housing. And so our next step is to go do a three-dimensional scan of this building and see what our starting point is. But because there may be some spaces that don't lend themselves to traditional housing, there may be opportunities that lend themselves to more of a live-work unit. And that's part of the reason that we're exploring it. I think that one we'll get into more, but it's definitely an idea we're open to and we'd like to see on the site, especially given the history of the site and the abutting properties uses. So with that, Corey, I think I'll turn it over to you for the civil conversation. It's all civil conversation.
Thank you, Rob. Good evening, everyone. I'm Corey Caldwell from TF Moran. We've been selected to provide the civil engineering, the site design, and navigate the permitting process for this housing project. I'm going to talk to you more about the property. Rob is the architect, designs everything from the walls in. We as civil engineers design everything from the walls out. The property contains 5.2 acres and it has 472 feet of frontage on Sherburne Road. The school sits in the front center of the property, as you can see from the site plan. And the existing school is shown as the brown building on this site plan. The elevation of the school, the floor elevation, is 67.6. To put that in perspective, the back, or the front, rather, Sherburne Road is at elevation 63 to 64. So that floor of the school sits about 4.5 to 5 feet higher than if you're standing on Sherburne Road. The back of the property is at elevation 55 to 57. And back here. That's a 10 to 12 foot drop. We're utilizing that to our advantage to mask those buildings behind the school. So if you're standing on Sherburne Road looking at the site goes up in elevation, but then drops off quickly in the back, so we can set that back building, that 90-unit back building, back 10 to 12 feet lower than the front school, which helps mask that building so you don't see a lot of it from Sherburne Road. PHC's goal for this property was to provide housing in the back of the site while maintaining the historic look and charm of the school at the front of the site. The back portion of the school that contains the gymnasium and the wings, as we alluded to in some of the earlier meetings, will be removed. The front portion of the school remains. There will be a 29-unit building which will be attached to the school here. And you can see these two wings, if you will, or these two jet outs from the building. Those are covered walkways that will connect the school building to the 29 unit in the back. Now, keep in mind, this back building also sets lower than the school building. So that rendering that you saw earlier, when you're looking at it, it's why you don't see much of that building, because it sits much lower. We'd like to remind everyone, too, this is a conceptual layout. As we navigate the permitting process, there will be some minor changes to this, but this is the vision, if you will, for the property. Combining the school, the attached new building behind the school, and the L-shaped building at the rear of the property totals 127 units. 90 units in the back building, 29 units in the middle building, and I'm not as good with this clicker as Rob is, and 8 or 9 units in the front building of the school. Per the Portsmouth zoning ordinance, this number of units, based on preliminary unit sizes, will require 170 parking spaces. The conceptual layout that you're looking at here has 175. As we progress through the design, we probably may add a few more, and the reason for that is because of these amenities, we want the community to be able to come and utilize these amenities. Therefore, we have to provide some parking for them. So the unit count will require 170, and we'll probably be providing at least 5 to 10 additional spaces. The amenities are planned in 3 locations. One, the front center of the school. We've outlined this for an amenity area. 2, this open space in the southwest corner of the site will be utilized for amenities. And 3, this area between the middle building and the back building is slated for some amenities. Additionally, there is a large patio that will be provided for the residents of the back building, and a courtyard which will be provided for the residents of these 2 buildings. There was a lot of questions during the first 2 sessions about traffic. I wanted to summarize what this unit count will require for traffic. So 127 units, based on traffic calculations and projections, will generate about 611 daily trips. Between 7 o'clock a.m. and 9 o'clock a.m., which is the a.m. peak hour, traffic volume will be 46 trips, 14 in and 32 out. Over the course of these 2 hours, this equals 2.6 trips per minute. So 127 units does not generate a lot of traffic during the a.m. peak hour. Also, during the p.m. peak hour, traffic volume will between 4 and 6 o'clock p.m. will be 58 trips, 34 in, 24 out. Over the course of these 2 hours, this equals 2 trips per minute. So at the busiest time of the day, which would be the peak hour between 4 and 6, there will be approximately 2 trips per minute, either going in or coming out of this site. The left-hand turn out of the site was a concern raised by some of the abutters. The There's a stop sign, as you all know, right here at the intersection of Greenland and Sherburne Road, and we understand that queuing sometimes backs up from that stop sign. And that's one of the reasons we made this a one-way in here, so you could navigate through the site, come out, and exit here. This way, there's much more space between this exit and the intersection of Greenland and Sherburne Road, so those cars that are backing up there won't interfere with cars coming out here. One of the other reasons we decided or opted for one way in and one way out is the bulk of the amenities here, we wanted to provide some parking at the front of the site for the community to come in, utilize these spaces close to the amenities, and the back parking spaces would be utilized more for the residents. So, in summary, we could fit a lot more units on this property. We looked at studies where we could generate up to or close to 300 units on the site. Instead, we're leaving much of the site as open space. We're providing significant landscape buffering, as shown on the plans, around 3/4 of the perimeter of the site. And we're providing several amenities for uses of the residents and the communities. By placing the new buildings in the middle of the property, behind the school, we're able to provide amenities and landscaping more at the outer edges of the property, which also help screen the property and contain the residential units towards the middle. This allows us to mask the buildings from the view at Sherburne Road, and it provides ample open space. We've done preliminary calculations, and we're able to provide approximately 47% of this site as open space. Most housing developments have a lot less of green space. There's more buildings, more parking, and it's usually less. So we feel we've balanced the site pretty well by clustering those units towards the middle. We can provide landscaping on the outer edge, amenities on the outer edge, and preserve a lot of open space. That concludes the site description. At this point, Andrea, I'll turn it back to you.
Hi again. That brings us to amenities, which was one of the most exciting, lively parts of the conversation that we had during the first two sessions. We wanted to bring in some concept of what amenities could look like, but we also wanted to hear from the community what you would like to see. Now, that ranged from what the community within the neighborhood that we're creating would like to see, and also how would that impact, or how would the surrounding communities use this space. We are working on ways to implement all of those ideas, and there were some very creative ones that were thrown out, including things like, how will the hours be run? How will the noise be managed? Is there a way to have some boundaries around that, so that if there's playgrounds that are near an abutter, will the noise from those playgrounds or lights from those playgrounds cause the abutter to have a different environment than they're used to? And how do we find middle grounds with all of those things? Some of the questions we heard included, how are we partnering with the city to know what amenities are offered elsewhere versus what we can bring onto the site, and making sure that it's not redundant amenities and we're complementing each other with what we're bringing to the community for the community-wide use. And so some of the ways that we did this was we brought out these flip charts with some lists that we had already come together with. These conversation prompts: green spaces, picnic areas, playgrounds, community garden, lawn seating, bike storage and tools, game area, exercise stations, and dog areas. And so that is ordered from the most popular choice, which was green space and trees, down to dog areas, which was the least voted on. And then we also had another flip chart that was open with a request for other suggestions. And the suggestions we received between the first night and the second night were landscaping, splash pad, public art, affordable art space, playground again, bird habitat, walking path to bus stop, beehives, bike storage, and greenhouse. So again, those are ordered from the most popular choice down to the greenhouse, which had the one single vote. And everything that was talked about the first night was also presented on the second night, so that we gathered the votes from the community on what they liked out of that first night's suggestions as well. We ordered them into categories: elements of nature, play equipment, places to sit and relax, access to alternative transportation, and art. Of those choices, the elements of nature was by far the most popular choice. So when we talk about that 47% of green space, where if we had heard, oh, the play equipment is the most wanted and desired piece of amenity, we may be looking at using more of the space and trying to get in as much as possible. But the value of places to sit, a community garden, picnic area, habitats for animals, those things came to the top. So I think that one way that we'll use the feedback that we received that evening as we go forward is to know where to place those priorities. It was a great conversation, and we are happy to be able to continue that conversation. So that sort of wraps up what we did for those first 2 nights. One of the things that we spent a lot of time with, the majority of our time, was answering questions and having conversation. And I think we're going to take a little bit of time tonight to open up the floor to anybody here who has questions and conversation that they'd like to continue with. Lori is ready to facilitate that.
Sure. Okay. Who's got questions?
Hi, I'm Liz Mooney, and I don't live near there. I live off of Woodbury Avenue. I'm just curious about infrastructure. Do we have enough water and sewer for them? And the building to me looks wonderful. I'm just wondering just about that capacity.
Great question.
This microphone doesn't. Is this mic? Okay. We did meet with the Department of Public Works to have that discussion, sewer, water, and the feedback we got was it's adequate. There's a 10-inch water line on our side of the street running down Sherburne. There's also a 6-inch water line on the opposite side of Sherburne. And there is sewer in the area. We are doing flow tests to determine the pressure of that water to ensure it's adequate. But early indications are the utilities and infrastructure are adequate for this many units.
Hi, the farmhouse. So 2 questions. Most of what I'm hearing tonight is still conceptual. There's not any hard fact to like what is going where in the green zone. Am I correct?
For the amenity space, you're
Yes.
correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so-
those 3 spots I think are good locations, but exactly what they are, you saw the scoring, but
Yeah,
one thing that
well,
somebody
kind of
pointed
so-
out was, what do people who are going to live there
Yeah.
want, or you want? And I know some city staff and elected officials have weighed in on what they want and what the city wants too.
One thing I'd add to that is we did hear you on the weekend, and so I think any project that we work on, it's always you want to be sensitive to abutting properties, especially when one is a single family residential in between an office park and a multifamily. So I think as we've just gotten the feedback from the community on where amenity priorities are, and so as we start to talk to our landscape architect and civil engineer about what goes where, some of that thought process will be, well, let's tuck some noisy things away from the farmhouse.
Hey, you might as well be it, and if you get called it, take it. So also, again, the abutting, I don't need to say about the trees or anything like that. You guys heard me, right? Am I correct in that?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hi, Esther Kennedy. This is actually two questions because Eric Anderson had to leave for a fisheries meeting. And the first question he had is the project goes through the planning board process. Will the size of this project increase beyond the 127 units? And is there any chance to go back to the 104 units that were originally put in the plan in the RFP? 2, will there be any more PHA public meetings when the final design is almost completed? Not quite, but almost. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. I can say that we won't propose anything that's north of this 127 units. I think there's opportunity to do that, but after lots of looking at this, we think that that's an appropriate density that accomplishes a lot of the trade-offs, and it's all about trade-offs between different designs or different goals. Sometimes it's not like we can do all these things. Sometimes it's taking away from one and going to the other. But we think that 127 units is a good number. And as we prepare for this to actually go through the planning board process between now and then, we'll be finalizing some of these designs. We haven't done like an existing conditions report on the school. We really and some other things, but so I would say there's not we're not going to be going north of that. Whether or not we'll be going less than that, or if so, how much is to be determined. And your second question was about whether or not the PHA is going to host any more meetings after this. What I will say is that all of the planning board meetings are public meetings, and we would encourage you to come to any of those meetings and share another opportunity to share your feedback. If we want, after a site plan is approved, or the planning board weighs in on that, if we want to have another meeting, I suppose we could do that. But that's what these three meetings are for. That's what we've been doing for quite some time. That's what we'll continue to do through the planning board process. Will there be other community meetings leading up to this? Yes. Certainly when we start working on the construction management plan, how construction fencing or how trucks get in and out of the site and all that kind of stuff, there will be a community meeting there because safety is the primary concern. Did I fully answer that question, Esther?
It really wasn't my question. However, I think you did. I think what the concern is, and what I've heard on the street, is there is still a lot of what ifs. What's the green space going to be? What is the ultimate parking? What is the size? You're still doing a what if on that. So as you get closer to maybe almost going to the planning board, it might be nice to do a community outreach meeting to kind of give an update of what you're going to take forward so people can prepare for the planning board if they have concerns or if they want to support it. So I guess I think there seems to be a lot of things that aren't finalized enough to really have a total opinion on as a citizen. And I'm hoping that as you get closer, almost there, that you can do that. Thank you.
think just to build on that question for additional community meetings, would it be unreasonable to ask your team to use the communication path you did to get us all here to keep us informed as the project moves through the public boards? So we didn't have to independently watch the planning board for when something's coming up or any variances that are needed for the highway overlay district. It would be helpful if we could get an email that said, okay, we're going before this board, we're presenting. I don't think we're allowed to sit in on work groups. I don't know, the public, but.
TAC is
public.
public, yeah.
Yeah. I just think that, you know, it would serve two purposes. It would keep all of us informed who are interested stakeholders, and, you know, you may not have to do additional meetings if
Right.
we're kept posted of as it's moving through. That may be a compromise.
We'll count on it. I don't know how people here learned about this, but I know Panaway has a Facebook page that was posted. We did email. We got some press over it. That might not happen again, but we did the city did an email. So however you all learned about this, we'll continue to do that. And I'd be interested to know where you learned about this. I mean, it is posted on the city website as a public meeting and everything. So, but we're happy to do that.
So, I'm sorry. Let me just add to that a little bit. As the Director of Outreach and Engagement, my hope is that we grow ways to communicate. I left my business card on the table out there, and I hope that people who are interested take that, and you can shoot me an email, and I'll add you to our email list. And as we go through this process and we have updates that are relevant, especially that are going to impact people, the construction management plan, the planning board, as we come up with these key points, I do want to be in touch with you about that. And I also want you to feel like you can reach out if you have questions that come up between then and now. This is about building relationships as much as it is anything else.
And yes, I think there's maybe 7 to 10 people from Panaway who are here, and I would, if Donna and Manny would host coffee from time to time to hear from this group or anybody, we would love the opportunity to do that. Yeah. So we'll do house parties. We'll come meet with people. Andrew will be available.
And you know,
I'll let him know.
Donna has, I think she wouldn't mind me saying this, but she and I have been in touch, and she's been able to post things on that Panaway Facebook page as I give her updates. She has volunteered to share them with the community as well. So I'm not a member of that private group, and I know that that is an access point for information for that community. So I do have a couple of people actually who have volunteered to help me make sure that's done.
Or we'll go to breakfast at Hebert's and meet with you guys. We know that's a place as well. If we're invited, I don't know if we need to get an invite for that, but we're happy to do that too.
I did have one more question for our civil engineer. My occupation, I'm cursed with understanding how schematic and concept drawings move forward to actual drawings. And when you show a lot of that green space and buffer, with all that parking, I'm noticing there's not a lot of designated spaces for snow storage, stormwater management, and you'll get there as you refine the plans. But when you're wall-to-wall parking around the perimeter, you've got to put the snow somewhere, and you've got to control your stormwater somewhere, whether they're detention areas or storm tech systems and things that you're going to be required to manage it. And I'm just wondering if you're going to see some of that, what is green space or buffer and green and plantings now disappear when you have to actually manage the site and be able to clear snow and store snow and get that through. So I'm kind of, I don't want to be a cynic about it, but I think it's ambitiously green right now related to how you manage the actual site, considering the grades. And
while he's going to the clicker, I think we got that question on the first night, but I think you were here on the weekend and it didn't come up. So there is some strategy in terms of where we've kind of allocated spaces. And as soon as he gets back to the site plan, we'll try to give you kind of, I mean, you sort of go into concept, you kind of know where you're going to do some of those things. So there is some thought process to that.
Yeah. So part of the reason we didn't put plantings, you can see there's plantings around the buffer, but you can see there's a lot of open space adjacent to the pavement on either side. And part of the reason we did that is to provide some snow storage. Additionally, we're thinking early that drainage would probably be under the parking lot and wouldn't be some form of detention pond, would be some type of storm tech or similar changer, but probably be under that paved parking lot on the back. The low point is back here. Drainage wants to go in this direction. So early thoughts are that that would probably go under this parking area, which would allow us to use more green space for amenities. So we think between leaving, a lot of these spaces open, where there aren't plants, we've got ample snow storage, and we're hoping to put that drainage, or most of the drainage, underneath that paved parking.
Thank you.
So it came up, you talked about construction, timing, when starting, when finishing. The one thing we haven't talked about, and excuse me, I love history, so I'm going to bring it up just a bit. Mm-hmm. We had this wonderful bridge redone that got us into Panaway, and all the construction was right next to me, where they stored the sand, the blocks, the lights, all of that. Has that been taken into consideration where the materials are going to be put and where they're going to, times of starting and ending and things like that?
No.
That's what I thought. That's
yeah.
why I had, because it was exciting when they did the bridge, because we found out after the bridge got started.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So this is different.
exciting.
At this, yeah.
Yeah.
So there will be one thing that'll be required of the city is for the contractor to create and submit a construction management plan. And so things like hours, things like where laydown area is, lighting, dust control, access and egress, that all of that will be discussed then, and you guys will be the most important to do that because it's going to be right next door. Yeah.
Yeah, just a thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We built a 50,000 square foot building on a tiny lot right in the center of Portsmouth. And that was really hard to accomplish all those things. And we did it, and it was disruptive to the neighbors, but far less than they thought. And I think Tom and others, Caulfield and others would attest to that. But this will be much easier. Not that we won't really be paying close attention to it, but a lot easier than Ruth's Place. Yeah.
Other questions?
Hoping to start construction?
If everything goes perfectly, then we would we want to get this into the first steps of the planning board process, which is finishing this design and a building design enough to go to the technical advisory committee, and that we hope to do in April. By June, we will have some much better idea of costs. We'll definitely have the building under like a schematic design, and all of the financial pro formas put together by June, and then the full application to the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority will be in September, and then we'll know about those tax credits right at the end of the year. That'll mean we'll close in the spring, and ideally we'll be starting construction in the spring of 2026, and have it fully placed in service and leased up by the end of 2027. That's perfect. You're in this business now. Things do change, but that's our goal right now.
seems like we're running ahead of schedule as far as questions goes. We're happy to answer anything else that anyone might have for us.
I'll go ahead and talk about amenities again because we don't have them on this site plan. So what we heard the most, first of all, does everybody know what a splash pad is? Everybody knows what so yeah, I mean, they're terrific because it allows sort of universal accessibility to the water in a way that, it can be a little anxiety provoking if you have 2-year-olds who are running around the outdoor pool. But a splash pad is sort of some water features, but it's like usually a rubbery surface and that kind of stuff. So those are cool. So we need to assess that. I think that Steve and Maureen might not like a splash pad right next to their house. It's sort of in the same category as a playground, except a playground would be used. Splash pad is really something that's going to be used about 8 to 10 weeks out of the year. What I think, and some of the mayor's been on. He's been he wants a splash pad in the city, and the amenities here, as per the RFP, was that these amenities would be available to the whole community of Portsmouth. That it was seen as a destination amenity, not just something for this particular neighborhood. So that's what we have. That's what we've got to accomplish one way or the other, unless that plan changes. What we heard the most of, I think, was the farm. There was really considerable discussion about what's on the site now at the school with the beehives and the maple sugaring, and heard a lot about just as an amenity, just having open lawn and trees. We heard a lot of that. Community gardens. We heard of that. Bird habitat. We heard. So I was actually pleasantly surprised about how many people had some real interest in the history of the site and the current uses on the site. And then Andrew had mentioned too, some people had asked about what other things does the city want to accomplish, and where's the balance? Having a community garden here, I think is awesome. I'm a gardener. I love it. I think everybody should have one. There's another community garden right up the street on 33 that I think is very successful. Does that negate the purpose of having some community garden here or not? If you were to, they asked that question. It's like, if it is the recreation department, and Councilor Blaylock is on that recreation committee as the city council representative, looking at it holistically about what the site should have in context to everything else in the city. But what the idea is to have this as a destination amenity. And of course, the people did ask, well, what are the people who live here going to want? So we don't know that yet, but yeah. Steve. That's all right.
I just want to revisit the splash pad, and maybe for the people who weren't here on the Saturday. The splash pads, I love the idea. I think it's great. And I know the number of people and everything, but there is a nice, beautiful place where they're building a skate park and a wonderful bike path where the kids can go around in circle. If you're 30 and younger, they're starting to jump into the air with their bikes in the woods in that area. And the thing is, I love the idea, but I was in Virginia at a soccer tournament where they have gigantic splash pads. And I can tell you, there was 3 ice cream trucks, there was a whole bunch of kids playing sports, running around, and the volume was being kids. You could hear them the minute they hit the water and it was cold. I'm not against it. I think this is a great idea, and I think there are really locations in town that would really fit that beautiful splash pad. And that, or even into Panaway where we have that whole area where it's not being utilized completely. I think it's being utilized as a playground area. And that, it has like a little baseball park in it. And I think that's great. I'm not So again, I'm not against it, but one of the things is I do believe in the timing of that and the uptake of it, and you mentioned it before. It's a very, very short-lived period of time, and then it's gone for the winter. And that seems to me, you get the drift. So thank you.
I'm out here with a microphone.
There's a splash pad in Newmarket, and it's in it's a recreational area, and it isn't anything like what you're describing in Virginia. Children are there, of course, during the summer, and it's a wonderful place. I bring my granddaughter there. It's fabulous. I think it's a wonderful choice and wonderful option for this project.
Where is it? I'd love to go see it. I mean, it's not operating, but I'd still love to go see it.
There's
Okay.
apartment complex off of 108, and it's at the foot of the
Okay. Right in the middle of town. Oh, okay. I know exactly
We'll
what
look
you're
it up.
talking about now.
We can look it up.
Right.
There's also one in
Yeah.
Somersworth. That's a good model.
Okay. Cool. All right. Yeah, no, I'd love to check that out.
Right here and then.
Hi, my name's Mary. I live in Panaway and I volunteer on the housing committee. On the housing committee, I was a big proponent of having a destination type amenity, and I just because it came up, I'd happy to explain a little bit about that. It was more so to ensure that as we're welcoming new neighbors to the Panaway area, that we're all able to enjoy space together and encourage that intermingling. So that was kind of the hope that I had, in the same way that I would hope someone walks across the bridge and hangs out at the swing set nearest my house, I could perhaps someday walk a kid down there. So it was about creating a cross connection within the neighborhood, especially over the bridge and the highway. And so that's part of the language around destination that I wanted. And I think also creating any sort of housing from scratch, especially multifamily housing, integrating as much green space and useful green space rather than just like passive green space that can't be well utilized is always a good idea in my personal opinion. And also why I also wanted to speak was just to advocate again for connections to other modes of transport. It's very car heavy, but I think also if you're thinking about some of those income levels and where folks would be working, it's likely that it could be a one car or a less than one car household and would need to have accessible bike storage and stuff to get to jobs elsewhere. Or as well, if there's any way we could get Coast to move the bus stop, I think that would be a really great thing because I know the bus used to go around my neighborhood and could have picked me up at my house, but Donna just tells me about that sometimes. Thank you.
I just want to thank you for that about bringing communities together, because it is something that we have done at our other properties as well. We often host events like at Ruth's Place to include the residents there in celebrations that we have with the neighboring property. And we have a department called Resident Services that's their specialty, and I believe that that's something that is important in building that community. So I think we'll see some of that as well. Aaron?
Mary, I just want to say thank you for clarifying the community-based amenity. What I was kind of envisioning was what you were talking about, which was something for the neighborhood to go there. I wasn't really envisioning something that would generate people from the other side of town to come here for a large splash pad.
And that would be cool too.
Yeah, just because, we're already close to doubling the size of the entire population of the neighborhood with this project. And so do we really want to invite 21,000 other people from the city of Portsmouth to say, come use this amenity, it's great, and let's all come out here? I think a splash pad's a terrific idea. Pierce Island's a wonderful piece of property next to the swimming pool, and they're spending a lot of money on it right now to improve that site. So I think splash pad's a great idea. Put it over there where you can't hear anybody screaming at the water and all that. I think community amenities that are more neighborhood attractive. Hey, I'm walking my dog, I might want to sit and talk to some of the neighbors that are here, maybe a gazebo out front or on the side property, you know, the benches, seating area in and amongst the greenscape. You know, the garden's not a terrible idea.
So I think that, whether it's a comment or a question, I think that if we're talking about the trends that we heard over the 2 community engagement sessions, I think that's reflective of the trend that we heard in that conversation, is that in general, I think the folks that we talked to wanted the community spaces here to be open so that people could walk through the site, so that people, not just residents, could enjoy the community and could engage with the residents here. And at the same time, I think we also heard that in general, folks didn't want it to be a destination driver. It was more about just being available. And I'll just add too, I mean, I'm interested in this project because I work in Portsmouth and I've been interested in housing for a long time. But I came to these engagement sessions because that's my job, because I'm part of the design team hired to do this project. You know, I didn't come here for fun. I came here, I skipped my kid's birthday and a snowy Saturday morning. And I would say 90% of the time when I come to public engagement sessions, it's very adversarial. It is very, how can we tear down? And it's very one opinion on one end versus one opinion on the other. And the comment I'd like to make, because a number of you here tonight were at both of those sessions, it was incredibly a positive conversation. People were really engaged. People were prepared with thoughtful, important questions. And I think there was a general understanding of every single person in this room is not going to be happy, but how do we do the appropriate things for this site to accomplish the goal of affordable housing on this parcel in a way that's supportive of the community and especially Panaway. And I just, myself personally, but I know the entire team is, you know, we came away from that. I was kind of wowed at the level of the conversations that we had over those 2 sessions. So for those of you who came out and spent your Saturday morning or your Thursday night to do that, we all really appreciate the feedback that you gave us.
Agreed.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. And the council, we intentionally put the creation of that new softball field, the turf softball field over at community campus, ahead of this, so that they would always have a home. So that'll be done before this is started. But yeah, I believe the planning's already been started. We've had several meetings on the rec board. We're already talking about the lines and everything. So the new field will be lined for softball and soccer and lacrosse, but it will not be lined for football. Anything else you want to add, City Manager? But yeah, that should be, I don't know the exact date on that fall. It should be completed by the fall. Yeah, so, yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I think
And
we touched on a lot tonight. Craig, were you about to say something?
I was just going to say, we'll stay all night if you want to say something in front of the group. On Saturday, I think we spent another hour talking about this stuff. So yeah, we'll stay all night if you don't want to raise your hand in front of the group either.
But just to bounce off of what Rob said about the type of conversations that we've had and how thoughtful everybody has been, and then Aaron, you asked about continuing the communication and how to be straightforward with that. There are some ways that people can be proactive. We are posting updates on our website and on our social media. We would love for you to follow along. As I said, I put my card out there on the table. So if people want an email address or a phone number to give somebody a call directly, Craig has always been very accessible like that as well. Please feel free to reach out that way. There's a very fun project that I'm excited about, and I don't know if you had a chance to stop and read on your way in. There's some small takeaway flyers on the table about a project partnering with the Athenaeum, and that is that they have volunteered to collect stories and visuals, whether it's photographs or newspaper articles, from people who remember both the Robert Lister Academy and also who are remembering Sherburne School, just to continue collecting that history, storing that history, keeping it alive. And as the PHA, we're also interested in those pictures, and if people are willing, we would love to consider those pictures as potentially artwork for our public areas and our common areas inside of the new buildings. So that's fun. And then we'll be doing the planning board and the TAC, and we'll talk to the community when it's time for a construction management plan, and we will definitely be keeping you up to date. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you.